don't have a PPT. Okay, so it's going to be completely interactive. The first 40 minutes, I thought I'll share my inputs with you. Okay, and the 15-20 minutes that is left in the 1 hour slot, I'm open to questions, which I would be glad to answer. Okay, so through the session, I may be sharing a few examples that I have of real cases that I have seen in my clinical practice. Of course, with due respect to the clients that I see, because the courage for a couple to come and open up to a totally new person is really amazing. I don't think many of us would muster that courage to do that, to open up to a new person with our most intimate issues that happen in relationships. So, with due respect to my clients, I would be sharing a few examples then and there whenever the need arises. Otherwise, what I'm going to present to you in this 40 minutes would be just the tip of the iceberg of what professionals in the area of relationship counseling actually do. Because this is actually a 30 to 40-hour module called relationship psychology that we offer at PsyCafe. So I'm just going to give you a glimpse of what it is, basically what I do at my center, my clinic, when I work with couples. And what are all the pointers that you can keep in mind if you have an opportunity to work with couples. Okay, that would be the outline of this talk. Now, when I say relationships, now today we live in a scenario where the definition of relationship itself has gone very far and wide. You know, the boundaries are not very clear cut for the concept of relationships. But this wasn't the case a few decades ago, right? Because a few decades ago, as far as intimate relationships were concerned, we just had two types. Either people in love, that is, people who were in a love relationship, or people who were married, people in a marital relationship. Okay, but today we have a wide variety of intimate relationships, which as professionals, we need to be aware of. Okay, so even before we get into the depth of the topic, I would like to focus your attention on the difference between relationship counseling and marital therapy, because these are terminologies which are used very synonymously by people everywhere, both by the professionals and by the lay people who come to us for help. So we need to have a very clear-cut understanding as to what marital counseling, relationship counseling is and what marital therapy is. Okay. So when a couple reaches out for help to us, first we need to have a preliminary interview with them. Mostly this is something that I do over the phone call itself when they call me to fix an appointment. Okay. Or when they message me on WhatsApp asking for an appointment. I just get a gist from them as to what is it that they want to discuss on. Okay. So this helps me as a professional, as a therapist, to decide whether they are seeking help for a primary distress or a secondary distress. Let me explain to you what this means a little in detail. Okay. When a couple is seeking help because they are not able to sort out a particular issue at hand. Like, for example, we stay in a joint family. My wife is not comfortable with my parents, and therefore she wants to move out while I'm not okay with it. This is with reference to a particular issue, right? So this is a perfect example of a primary distress. Okay. Secondary distress is slightly deeper, where it is not for a particular specific reason that they are seeking help for, but there are many reasons and they have tried many ways to sort out things. And in the process, the coping mechanisms that they have developed for themselves become a problem for them. Right? Which gets generalized to so many other issues apart from the specific issue from where it started. So that becomes a secondary distress. Am I clear? Okay. So when a couple reaches out to us for a primary distress, we mostly make use of relationship counseling, meaning we do not use great therapeutic strategies to help them. And the number of sessions we have with them also will be limited to maximum 2 or 3. Okay. This should not be confused with solution focused brief therapy because of words like solution and brief. Okay, which are essentially a part of relationship counseling. All right. And then we go to the second, the second type, where if a couple reaches out to us for help regarding a secondary distress, then we get into marital therapy or relationship therapy, depending on whether the couple are married or not. Because when I use the term couple, it does not necessarily mean that they are a married couple. Okay. So, so this is one important point we need to keep in mind, because as I told you earlier, today relationship is a wide umbrella term. Okay. So as therapists, as professionals working in the area of relationship psychology, we need to know the types of contemporary relationships that are existing in the society today as well. Right? Because today we have live-in, we have friends with benefits, we have open sex, we have casual sex, and these are somewhere closer to a relationship because two people of the opposite gender are in close, intimate relationships. Over and beyond that, we have a separate group of LGBT and their relationships have very different dynamics. So we are not going to include that in the talk today. Okay, this is exclusively for two people of opposite genders in an intimate relationship, not necessarily in a love or a marital relationship. Okay, so as therapists, we have to be aware of these contemporary relationships which are there, and also make sure that we are completely non-judgmental when we are dealing with such clients who come from these kind of contemporary relationships. Okay. Now, I as Sangeeta may not like a live-in relationship. That is my opinion. That is for me. But if I sit as Dr. Sangeeta Makesh, marital therapist, then my opinion does not matter. It will not feature anywhere in my professional work. Okay, you are only treating a client as a client with utmost respect and dignity. Okay, so that is something that we have to be very, very clear about. And the second important thing that we need to keep in mind as a therapist is, now most of the couples who come to you will tell you something like, "Na ungla dhaan nambi vandirukken." Right? I've tried everything else. Finally, I have come to you with the belief, with the strong belief that you are going to fix my relationship. Right? Therefore, you have to do it. This is something that you will very commonly hear from your clients who come really in a desperate situation to make things work. Right? But you have to be very, very careful there. You are not a carpenter or a plumber to fix the relationship there. Nor are you a broker to patch up things together. Right? So a relationship counselor's job does not necessarily involve only making people come together. Right? What is our job then? You thoroughly explore the individuality of both the individuals, and from a scientific perspective, analyze whether this is going to work or not. And if it is not going to work, break the bad news for them, offer the support that it would need. If it would work, then you start working on the relationship. This is exactly what is expected of you as a relationship counselor, not in the contrary that whoever comes to you, you need to make an attempt to patch them up. And you also have to make this known to them in the first contract you draw with them, even before therapy starts with them. Okay, no false hopes, no false guarantees. And you have to completely make your client the ownership, to own the relationship, not the problem, to own the relationship. The relationship is yours. There is a problem in your relationship which I validate, which I agree with, and I'm here to help you out. But immaterial of the help that you receive from me, you have to be convinced to put in your effort to make it work. Right? I'm like a gardener. You bring a sapling from the nursery because you love it, and you put it in a nice glass bowl and you put it in the balcony. Okay, and you are calling me as a gardener to find out what is the best manure that I can use. I'm willing to help you. But I can't come every day to water your plant. That is your responsibility. Okay, so any relationship, any intimate relationship requires a lot of nurturance, which only the two individuals involved in that relationship can do. I am an external factor offering help. Okay, so that is something you have to make your client understand. And the third point that you need to remember as a therapist is try not to give too many technical jargons to your clients. Okay, because the moment you start using technical jargons, they think something is grossly wrong with them or with the relationship. Try to normalize their problem as much as possible. Not to discount the problem, not to say this is not at all a problem, but to say, yes, I see that there is a problem. I see there is an issue, but let us not grandiose it. Let us look at it the way it is. Okay, it is normal. A lot of people will be going through this. Yes, it is distressing. I'm willing to help you. Okay, so try to normalize their problems rather than grandiosing it or discounting it or using too many technical jargons to make it sound like it's too clinical. See, as it is, mental health professionals face that, what do I say, a kind of taboo when people come to us. Right? A lot of people still do not know the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist. Even the so-called educated population, urban population, many times you end up giving them that explanation, which we are okay to do, right? But in the context of that, they have a lot of inhibitions to come to us. And to top it all, when we give them a lot of scientific explanation, see, we have to operate on scientific explanations as professionals, but we have to serve it in a way, in a platter that suits them, that they can receive without fear. So that is very important for us as a therapist. We have to relate to them. The therapeutic alliance, especially for a relationship counselor, is very, very mandatory, extremely important. You have to relate to them. Okay. And another thing which I find in a lot of professionals who have attended our workshops at PsycCafe, whenever there is a need to make a referral, they think it is a reflection of their personal inadequacy. This is a complete myth. Okay, like Sandhya said, both PsycCafe and Element H works in collaboration with a lot of clients. So whenever I feel the need that this person, this individual sitting in front of me, although who seek help for relationship counseling, needs some assessment to be done, I do a preliminary screening. Okay, I do that because many times what happens is when a client comes to you and you ask them to go to another professional for something, then they find it very difficult. You know, they say, all those kind of things. So then what I do is I do a preliminary screening, for me to be sure that this person definitely needs in-depth clinical assessment. And if I feel the need for it, then I convince the client, I tell them only when you go for assessment to a clinical psychologist, then I can proceed with therapy. That gives me a much better direction for therapy, right? So it's also our duty and responsibility to make the client understand why he or she is being sent to another professional. And that definitely does not mean you are a failure as a professional yourself. It's not like I am not able to do and therefore I'm sending. No. For the kind of help the client needs, Kirti is the person. She is the clinical psychologist who needs to do the assessment. And I am here to do what needs to be done with Kirti's report. That's how it works. It doesn't mean I'm better or she's better or I'm no good or she's no good. That's not the point. The point here is the welfare of the clients. So if you feel as a professional, a client needs the help of another professional, we have to do it. And that does not mean it is an inadequacy on us as a professional expert. All right. And finally, what we have to, I think I've covered almost everything. Okay, so these are the things that as a relationship counselor, as a relationship expert, we need to keep in mind while we are working with our clients. Okay, so next I go on to tell you what is the process in my center when a client approaches me for help. Okay, so first I find out what is the kind of relationship they are into. Are they in a love relationship? Are they in a live-in? Are they married? Are they married and separated? Are they in a long distance relationship? Are they practicing open sex in their marriage? Are they into the practice of practicing casual sex? So are they having friends with benefits in spite of being married or in spite of not being married? So all these things I first assess as to what is the kind of relationship that they are in, because each one has very specific dynamics to it, apart from the overall dynamics, but each specifically defined relationship has specific dynamics. Okay. So that is the reason we need to be clear as to where they stand. And then usually when people come for relationship counseling or for relationship therapy, they come with the notion that it is always going to be a joint session for them, because we are talking about relationship, and we are also emphasizing the fact that in a relationship it is not the individual who's important, it is the relationship which is important. So my client is the relationship. This is what we emphasize with them, just to make them understand that relationship is the priority there, right? So then it is quite possible that they misunderstand the process to be always joined from day one to the last session that we have. But I explain to them the process. I tell them, see, the first session will be a joint session. Now, the idea of this, I don't tell them, this I'm telling you. The reason for having the first session as a joint session is that I want to study the dynamics between them in terms of their communication and comfort level, right? So, see, there are couples who come to our clinic and they don't even want to sit next to each other. They would have been married for like 20 long years. But in my clinic, the arrangement is I have a table, there's a chair on this side, and there are two chairs on the other side. That's the setup I have. And the two chairs that I have put for my clients are pretty close to each other because I mostly see couples. But then I have seen couples who don't even want to sit next to each other. They will pull the chairs apart and they will sit. Or I've had a couple, who pulled the chairs to the sides, on either sides of the table, and they sat because they didn't want to sit next to each other. And there are couples who don't want to face each other in therapy, right? I mean, these are dynamics which you will observe in the first joint session when they come to you. And it is also a test for you, because once you finish the sessions with them, you will see them comfortably sitting next to each other. So I bring that to awareness to the client. Do you remember the first session when you came here? Right? It is not, it is not a feather on my cap. Why I'm trying to bring that awareness to the client is for them to understand that from where they were and from where they are today. And it is completely because of their convinced effort that transformation has taken place. Which means in the future also, when such issues come, they have the capacity to work on it, put in that effort, be convinced that it will work, and it will work. That is what they are seeing now. Okay, so that is the reason why I bring that transformation to their awareness. Okay, and okay, the first session would be a joint session, and then subsequently I have individual sessions. I have at least 2 individual sessions with the male member and 2 individual sessions with the female member. I'm not saying husband wife because it's otherwise also. Okay, so what is the purpose of having these individual sessions? First and foremost, I am allowing the person to ventilate in the most uninhibited environment possible, because the partner is not present there. Sometimes what happens is when he or she says something, then the partner will immediately interrupt and that flow goes off. And you're not able to express yourself in your full emotional containment. It's a kind of a mask that you have to wear. And there is also an underlying fear. Okay, now that I'm telling all this in front of her, how is she going to react to me when I get back home after the therapy session? You told this, right? So which means it is there in your mind. No, that is why it is coming out. No, all those kind of things, he or she, that fear is there, that such things can happen. They can happen though, because I do, in the contract itself, I do tell them that, yes, therapy is a can of worms. So when the therapy is on, you will find such instances, but you have to be aware of it so that you cope with it better. Right? It's not going to be a smooth flow. No. Let's be aware of it. Let's be prepared for it. Okay. So then, so that gives the person, when I see a person individually, it gives him or her the scope for completely pouring out the emotional baggage that he or she has been carrying with reference to the relationship. Right? Plus, for me as a therapist, it gives me the opportunity to observe the communication style, the communication pattern, and how this person has been handling frustrations, anger, etc., in the relationship. Okay, so it helps me to understand this also. Over and beyond these 2 points, one more thing I insist on an individual session is, I would also like to know a little about the childhood experiences and parenting that this individual has undergone. Okay, the attachment styles, because in many cases of domestic abuse, you would see that this individual who's abusing now would have been abused by the parent. Okay, so then what happens is, and they don't even know it is wrong. I'm working with a client now where the husband brutally beats up the son. Okay, and when you ask him that, he will say, that's the way my father, hurt me. That's the way my father hit me black and blue. That's how it is, right? What is wrong? When he makes a mistake, or I think he makes a mistake, that's the way I deal with it. Right? So and they all stay in a joint family. And when this father hits the son who's 4 years old now, the grandfather is very much present in the scene, but will not offer any kind of intervention there. He's a silent spectator. So what is the message the father gets? This is the norm. This is how children have to be parented. And when the wife intervenes, she says, see, this is not how it should be. Then the wife is also opposing him, which means she is also wrong, and therefore she also gets beaten up. Right? So we also need to see what is the negative mirror these individuals have gotten from their parents when they were children. We have these specific statements, no, I'm unlovable, I'm worthless, I'm powerless, I'm bad, I'm not a good enough person. All those kind of things. Because when parents are highly rejecting, highly neglecting, or if they've been very terrorizing, or they could even be narcissistic. The parents themselves could have been very narcissistic, that they were so totally self-absorbed, praising themselves all the time, that they will never acknowledge any achievement or success from the child. Right? And then what happens? The child totally thinks that, I really don't matter, or I'm nothing without my parents. When parents are very overprotective, they're so enmeshed with the child does not believe that he's an individual by himself. And that becomes a thought pattern. In many Indian men, if you see, this is a thought pattern which is so strong in them. They believe only their mothers are superwomen. Right? And they expect the same superwoman syndrome in their partners, which the partners may not be able to achieve or don't believe in achieving. Right? And then the partner becomes a failure in the face of this person. You see how a childhood experience impacts current relationships, right? So I would like to know some details about the childhood experiences of this person. What is the impact of those childhood experiences on him or her now as an adult? So this is again one of the reasons why I would go for a individual session. Okay, and I apply the formula of N3C. N New York, 3 number, C for cat. Okay, so N stand for needs, and the 3 C's are characteristics, capacity, and circumstances. Okay, so this gives a clear-cut overview for us as to what this person is and what this person wants. Okay, these are my characteristics: physical, psychological, socio-cultural. Okay, these are my circumstances at the 3 levels: the micro, meso, macro level. Micro level is what is it that I am as an individual? What are my characteristics? Okay. Meso level is in terms of the family. This is the community I belong to. These are the rituals we follow. Right? Those kind of things. And I believe in these rituals. That's at the meso level. Macro level is more in terms of the society. Which generation do you belong to? See, when you're working with a Gen X, it's very different from when you're working with a Gen Z. Right? So, I mean, that has a very huge impact on the character. Right? Someone has a question? Oh, okay. So you try to see the micro, meso, macro levels of the characteristics of that person, and the circumstances, the characteristics, and what are his capacities, what are his strengths, physical and socio-cultural also sometimes. Okay, what are his strengths? You know, whether finance is his strength or education is his strength, right? So these things, and the psychological strengths would be something like the self-efficacy belief, the resilience the individual has, all that. Physical strengths in terms of physical health, energy levels, and so on. Okay, so this is the basic formula I use for case history taking before I even start therapy with the individual. This I do for both the partners who come. Okay, and then I also try to this is for the individual sessions, which I do with the 2 individuals separately, which goes on for about maximum 2 sessions, not more than that. Okay, because if you go on for more than 2 sessions at a stretch, I mean individual sessions, then the client will ask you, I came for my relationship issue, what are you doing with me? Okay, so I tell them, okay, this information is enough for me at the moment. We will go in for a joint session. If need be, we will again come back for individual sessions, if need be. So I'm just putting a comma, I'm not putting a full stop. So I'm also prepared, they're also prepared that at any point later, I might call them back for an individual session. Okay, and then only the actual therapy starts with the individual session, with the joint sessions. Okay, so in the joint sessions, the first thing that I see is the communication pattern between the 2 of them. Okay, because in most instances, they will tell you, we have never stopped. We always stopped. But what is the essence of the communication? You need to measure, right? Now, there are 2 types of communication that partners have to engage in. One is a couple discussion, and number 2 is decision-making conversations. Okay, these are essential communication strategies that a couple need to follow. In many instances, especially for the couples that you see in practice, they will all be following the second type of communication, decision-making conversations. We fight, we argue, because there is always a problem in our lives. So there is nothing that we talk about other than the problem. When we talk, it is about the problem. And when we talk about the problem, we escalate and we fight. Okay. The first part of couple discussion is grossly absent. So what is this couple discussion? Right? A couple discussion is anything from sharing information to sharing feelings or asking for help to apply medication on the psychological injuries that you have incurred in the relationship, or offering to give that psychological first aid to the other person to nurse his injuries or her injuries, basically to stop the emotional bleeding that's happening inside. Because only when these psychological injuries are left to rot without being attended to, there is constant emotional bleeding, which leaks into the relationship quality. You constantly feel that you're being betrayed. You constantly feel that you're not being understood, right? You constantly feel the lack of empathy. You don't feel being respected in the relationship, right? You don't admire each other. See, all that is also part of couple discussion. So to what we talk extensively about appreciation, acknowledgement. Admiration is the highest level of that. So when partners come to me, I ask them, what is it that you really admire about your husband? Then the wife says, he's the #1 ophthalmologist in the city. I said, so are you running an eye care hospital? Why do you need a #1 ophthalmologist? I'm asking you this question in the context of a wife. What is it in him that you have really admired? She will think for 10 minutes. Probably some answer will come. What is it that you dislike about the person? He doesn't listen to me. Immediate, quick response. Right? See, only when there is couple discussion, only when there is sharing, you will start admiring the other person, because you need to know the other person to admire the person. Right? So that mutual comfort and mutual admiration are extremely important, which many couples today lack. And acknowledgement, appreciation also is looked upon as being very gender specific. You know, there is a wife who came to my clinic, and the husband was also sitting in one of the joint sessions. They had been married for about 18, 19 years. And all hell broke loose when the wife told the husband that, the husband approached the wife saying, next year is going to be our 20th anniversary, wedding anniversary. So how do you think we want to celebrate? Of course, it was all before the COVID times. So she said, I would like to have a divorce from you on that day. Okay. So that's when they realized they needed help. And it's not that they were living together for 18 years, doesn't mean that there was quality in their relationship. So why did I say that? So basically, when they came to me, he said, I asked the same question, what is that one particular thing which you really like in your life?
Gender specific character.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. So actually, when they came for the joint session, I asked both of them. In fact, I asked the husband first, what is that one thing? When is it that you feel most loved? Okay. And then he said, my wife is a great cook, and she makes sure that she makes dishes that I like. Okay. And then the wife gave one startled expression. She just turned to his side and said, really? And you never told me this for 18 long years. And today you are opening up in front of the therapist, who's one third person sitting there. Right? And then the husband realized. And then I asked the same question to her. In this 19 years of marriage, what is it that you have appreciated him for? And she said, he has nothing to be appreciated. He's one dull kind of a guy. There's nothing that I can really find in him that and think that he deserves appreciation. Then I asked her, does he work? She said, yes. He's the assistant manager in a bank. So I said, what happens when he doesn't turn to work every month? Or he just takes off for a month with a loss of pay for no reason. He says, I want to rest. And he takes off. And he loves the rest for a month, so he continues the rest for the rest of his life. What happens? He said, oh my God. I said, yeah, which means he's been a great provider to this family of you and 2 children for the past 19 years. Doesn't he deserve to be appreciated? She said, Idu kuda sollanuma. Should I even say this? That's his duty, right? So cooking is not your duty, but going to work is his duty, is it? He can also say the same thing, right? You are a woman, therefore you need to cook. What is the big idea for me to come and tell you thank you? Or you're being acknowledged. Now, why I'm citing this example is when we are talking about appreciation and acknowledgement in a relationship, it is definitely not gender specific. It is applicable to both the genders. To the extent you are an individual, you are a human being who likes to be appreciated and acknowledged. That's about it. It's not that only men need to do it or only women. We say, no, men can't do it. They're not made to do it. Are all women made to do it? That is something that we need to ask ourselves. right? But sometimes what happens is we take things for granted because it's available, it's there. We don't put ourselves in a situation, what if it is not there, right? Anyway, so these are the things that happens in, and I teach them the different dimensions of trust, because again, trust is a concept according to us, which has only to do with the loyalty part. The moment we say trust in relationships, the first understanding that crops into our mind is that sexual trust, sexual loyalty, right? There are people who say, whatever you do with me, however you abuse me, but I know you will not go for another woman or you will not go for another man. Does that mean there is trust in the relationship? Sexual trust may be there, I don't deny, but trust does not necessarily mean only sexual trust. There are different layers to trust. Boundary is a level of trust, boundary laying in a relationship. Reliability, accountability, confidentiality, integrity, non-judgmentality. See, when we are talking about couple discussion, the first person whom we should be comfortable to open up to share anything, positive or negative, should be the partner. Now, where will that mutual comfort come from? Only if you're sure that you will not be judged by your partner, isn't it? Already you were hurt. Why do you want to go tell a judgmental partner and hurt yourself much more? So only if you're guaranteed that your partner will non-judgmentally listen to you, empathize with you. That's all that is required. You're not expecting solutions, but you need that empathetic listening. In fact, most of the clients, I close with them saying that hence on, be therapists to each other, because that's what we do as therapists, isn't it? We engage in a lot of empathetic listening. Doesn't mean that we accept whatever they say, right? But we empathetically listen. We don't interfere. We don't, I mean, we don't interfere in between with a very non-judgmental tone or attitude. We do clarify, we do confront, we do challenge, but there is a way to do it. That is why they're coming to us. So then I tell them, you try to be therapists to each other. I am always an external factor. Don't become dependent on me, because that's also something that you need to be very careful as a therapist. You know, they try to influence you to take sides. Now, the first person who approached you for an appointment, say, let's say the wife, you know, if she understands that you are confronting her more, she will tell you something like, ma'am, if the problem was with me, if the fault was with me, do you think I would have approached you for help? You know, this is a very subtle way of telling you, look, I only approach, which means I don't have any mistakes on me. You please look into the other person. And one more thing you have to remember as a relationship consultant is, see, there'll be a lot of legal issues also which crop up, especially when a couple are, you know, going in for a divorce or whatever. So then they will ask if you will give letters to them. Okay, one thing you have to remember is, like I told you, your client is the relationship there. It is not the two individuals who are there. Therefore, you have to make it very clear to your clients, that is both of them, and tell them that, yes, I will give in writing for how many sessions you met me and what was indicated to you. No other information will be revealed on account of confidentiality. Even if I sometimes find out that there's a personality disorder in one of the individuals, I will not put it on my letter, right? Because I am not eligible to give a report on that. I am not a clinical psychologist, right? I can tell you I did identify a few traits of borderline for which the person was recommended for clinical assessment to a clinical psychologist. I will put that because I did that, right? But other than that, I cannot state that this person has borderline personality disorder, because that's an assessment that I didn't do. I know that's what it is, but I can't put it on paper. And also we have to be very clear in telling them that it would be the same letter written with a carbon paper. Those days we used to write with carbon papers. Now it's two printouts, that's all. Okay. But the content is ditto, the same content given to both of them, so that nobody can use it against each other. Neither of them can do it. Okay, so that's one point I forgot to mention. So that's something that we need to be very clear. See, for us, we cannot take sides. We are absolutely unbiased and neutral. We only look at the relationship and try to make it work if it is workable. If it is not, we have to be honest and transparent in telling them that you would be better off without this relationship. But at the same time, it does not mean that relationships will not work for you at all. Because sometimes what happens is our clients will get into that overgeneralization discussion. You know, it's already my second marriage and it's not working, which means relationships will not work for me. Not necessarily, right? Probably this didn't work. Be very specific with them. You can be hopeful there, but not giving false hopes in terms of trying to make a relationship which cannot be worked to work. That's again a very temporary thing we are resorting to. There will be no permanency to the relationship, right? So this is how joint sessions proceed. And usually the number of joint sessions would be about 5 to 6. Okay, and then I close the session. And invariably my closing statements will be two. One, I say the therapy was not intended for you to bring changes in your partner. It actually should have helped you to become a better mate yourself. It's all about being the right mate. And number two, I tell them, try to be therapists to each other henceforth. Because you've seen me through the sessions, you've seen me what I do, how I communicate. I have been quite confrontational and challenging, but I've made sure that the intention was not to hurt you, right? It has only put your relationship in a better space now. Likewise, in your relationship also, yes, there will be confrontations, challenges, everything, crisis, but it is all in the way you want to steer it through, right? So try to be therapist. We will meet again after a month for a review. And you tell them in between, if there is any crisis, if there's any firefighting, I would be glad to help. But otherwise, I would appreciate if you feel that you are empowered to handle that situation yourself. I am here, I'm available. Doesn't mean you become dependent on me. Right? Otherwise, they totally switch off their rational brain when it comes to relationship crisis. Immediately, you will get a call, you will get a message. Man, this is what happened. What do I do? Right? Instead, I tell them, you do whatever you think you can do, and then you report to me what you did. We will talk about it. At least there's some contribution from your side, right? You made an effort to do something. That's appreciated. Okay. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share with you. A very basic framework of what we do in marital therapy and relationship counseling. So I hope it was useful. Now I'm open to questions. You can shoot your questions.
Thank you so much. I think it was comprehensive, and I think the whole thing in a gist. And of course, it doesn't stop here. We have to do more. You were talking about your relationship psychology course. Maybe you can throw a light on it till participants are, asking their questions.
Yeah, so this is a course which has a 30-hour module. It's a 30-hour module, which includes the aspects of trust that I spoke about, the stages of relationship that people go through, and a whole lot of other things regarding, the concept of relationship itself has become so scientific that we have a format to apologize. This is the way you need to apologize in a relationship. That is a 1-hour module. So, it throws lights on such specific things in a relationship. Usually we say, okay, own up your mistakes, apologize. That's about it. But how to apologize is a 1-hour module. What I'm trying to tell you is, till we come to this field, we look at love, relationship and all from a very emotional perspective. But once you are in the field, you understand how scientific it is. All that is. There's so much of chemicals, so much of formulae that is there that governs healthy relationships. It is very interesting. So this I'm planning to run one batch in June. So if anyone is interested, you can get in touch with me on my mobile number, which Sandhya will share. Okay. Let's just check if I have left something out.
There are some questions in the chat.
Oh, let me just once. Thank you, Rajni ma'am. What pieces do you picture? Is workable or not? Okay. Hi Nirja. Okay.
Hi, ma'am.
Yeah, one sec. I'll go one by one. Okay. Sandhya, if you don't mind, you can shoot the questions from the chat box as I finish each. Okay.
Okay.
That's my rate of using technology. Sorry about it.
Yeah, sure. I will.
So, okay. So Neerja's question is, on what basis do you decide it is workable or not? The first most important red flag is any kind of abuse in the relationship. Okay, any abuse has a zero tolerance policy. Okay, whether it is verbal, physical, sexual, emotional, which most of the times is not even being recognized as a mode of abuse. Okay, financial and technological. So any of these abuses in a relationship is a strict no. But again, you don't decide that they need to part ways. You say this is how it's going to be. This is the abuse cycle. Okay. So once you come to the better stage where the perpetrator apologizes, then the victim is again put in a better spot to think that it is all over. But it is not over. It is to begin at any point. As at that point, it is stopped. It is not over. So, those kind of information we need to give, and those kind of relationships definitely are not workable, right? You can always give them the supportive therapy that they need, because there are clients who will ask you for that. Ma'am, I can't leave this relationship for whatever reasons, but I would like to come to you for help for myself. So there it is just supportive therapy where you are willing to listen to. I mean, you're just giving them a shoulder to cry on, right? And kind of empower them wherever is possible. What is it that you see in contrast in contemporary relation? Ayo, that's gone.
Yeah, I'll read out.
Yeah.
So the next question is the course accredited or affiliated to anybody?
It is not. And someone asked whether it is online. Yes, everything is online now because of the pandemic.
Yeah. So
Sandhya, I got that question halfway through. I missed it. Something on.
How do you make the couple understand emotional abuse is bad and worse than physical abuse?
Sorry.
Yeah. How will you make the client understand that emotional abuse is as bad as physical abuse?
Okay. Simply for the fact that physical abuse is obvious and emotional abuse is not even obvious. It is like you're fighting with an invisible demon. Right? At least physical abuse, you know it is coming, you're seeing it coming. But emotional abuse, every minute you are being emotionally abused and you don't even know that you're being emotionally abused. There was one on Shruti's question.
Yeah. Is it a possibility just because Shruti is Aparna's? Is it possible that couple is not pleased and they will pull a lawsuit? How do you deal with that?
Not pleased with the therapist?
Yes, with the session, yeah.
Fortunately, so far I have not come across such a client who's been displeased and filed a lawsuit. But if that being the case, I think I have to consult my legal consultant to see how to take it forward. And one more thing about recording also, some clients will ask you whether the session can be recorded. Okay, be assertive. Tell them no recording in a counseling or a therapeutic session. Absolute confidentiality, because if they can use it however they want to. Okay, so absolutely. And sometimes they try to act funny. They will put it on recording mode and they will put it under the table and they will try to, keep it. I mean, you can make out, right? So just be cautious about that. All those things can happen. Yeah.
What is it that you see in contrast in contemporary relationship as compared to traditional ones? Do you think these relationships are fragile and what could be the reasons?
Well, I don't think they are fragile. Even if I think so, that's my opinion. So I don't want to put my opinion in the group forum. The basic difference between traditional relationships and contemporary relationships is that traditional relationships have a law book. We are very clear about what is right and wrong in a traditional relationship called marriage so far. But these contemporary relationships have only mushroomed recently. So we don't have a law book for it. So we don't even know what is right and wrong in these contemporary relationships. Like, for example, I was seeing a client who were in a live-in relationship for 7 years, both of them highly qualified, they were holding great jobs. In fact, they didn't want to get into the legal forum of marriage because they thought their careers would get affected because of that. Okay, so they thought live-in was much more flexible for both of them, but yet they were together for 7 long years, no children, of course. And I mean, when they came to me, they had just completed their 7th year together. And the reason why they approached me was the wife wanted to have open sex in this marriage. No, sorry, not in this marriage, in this relationship, in this live-in relationship, which the male was not okay with. So for her, it is a contemporary relationship by itself. Live-in itself is not approved. So how does it matter if I'm going to have open sex with someone else outside? How does it, and what right has this person to tell me that it is not okay? So that's why I said contemporary relationships have no law books. So it is actually a template of dynamics is being drawn by those two people who are in that relationship. In fact, I wouldn't even say it is applicable and generalized for all live-in relationships. It is very, very specific for those two individuals in that relationship. See, here too, if the male is consenting for open sex, then it is not an issue. But when it comes to that point, then they think about how could you be with me for 7 years and still think about, having sexual intimacy with someone outside. And the counter question is, anyway, this is not a committed relationship, right? I mean, we were comfortable with each other, we were together, but at any point, we never promised each other of sexual loyalty. So that is where contemporary relationships become, I won't say they are fragile. The point is you don't know where to draw the boundaries, you don't know what are the norms, you don't know what are the terms and conditions that govern it. So there's a lot of confusion there. That is the difference. How to make a person understand that he's emotionally abusing and it hurts the other one. Okay, let's be very honest about it. Most of the abusers, I'm not saying they're men alone, there are women abusers as well. Most of the abusers get into these abusive behavior probably because of a faulty attachment style that they have had as children, and which eventually kind of unfolds into a personality disorder, like a borderline or an antisocial personality, most of the cluster B types, right? So having said that, we have to understand personality disorders are not curable. You can treat them for the symptoms, but that is their personality. How can you change a personality? Like, for example, there is an antisocial personality where there's absolutely no remorse, no guilt, no learning from experience, absolutely cold and aloof, typical ASP, right? And an individual ends up being with this person in an intimate relationship. So abuse is definitely part of the relationship. It is a mandatory dynamic there. And with what belief are we going to say that it will change? How is it going to change? I'm not saying you quit. I'm only saying that it will not change because I have scientific evidence to say that. Now it is your call to decide whether you want to continue with this abuse or not. I'm only saying, you go out. I'm not saying. This will be like this. But you decide what you want. See, there is also this trauma bonding there, no? And the way these abusers apologize is so nice that you're so naive and vulnerable that you really can't say no to this person. And then you say, Ayo, madam sonna madri illiye, madam edo tappa solliranga, this person is a very nice person. Madam, oru tharava onna paatha, she will know. And they will pull this abuser to my clinic also. I've had experiences like that also. Madam, oru tharava neenga paakanonu I have brought this person, so that you change your notion about abusers. So,
thank you so much.
And I think there was one question on personality disorders. How do you convince people with personality disorders, is it?
Yeah, something about, one question was about possessiveness. And we also have a question on premarital counseling. Would you recommend premarital counseling?
Of course, yes. Of course, yes. Because most of the times when they come to us, we are actually in a corrective mode, right? I mean, things are a lot better if we are in a preventive mode. I'm not saying correction is not possible, but correction is a repair. The wounds may heal, but the scar remains. You know, there is one husband who came to me after 25 years of marriage, and he told me, you know, from the beginning they never used to respect me. And so I asked him, give me instances where you felt being disrespected. So then he said, நான் பொண்ணு பார்க்க போன அன்னைக்கு சொஜ்ஜி மட்டும்தான் பண்ணாங்க, பஜ்ஜி பண்ணல. அப்பவே they thought this man is only one BA economics, one clerk in the bank. So probably they thought he conveniently discounted the fact. They said yes to this person. And he's married for 25 years to that girl. And after 25 years, he says, அப்பவே என்ன disrespect பண்ணாங்க. So that's, wounds are there. I mean, scars will remain.
Yeah.
But if we address these issues, if we kind of bring an element of preparedness in individuals getting into relationships, then they know what to expect. They know how it works. They know how it unfolds. They kind of prepare. I'm not saying there will be no conflicts if they attend premarital education. I'm only saying they will have better tools with them to handle themselves and the relationship.
Yeah.
And something on possessiveness, no?
Yeah. Possessiveness, if I am abusing, how will I stop? And one more on, if my wife has personality disorder, how will I tell her that she has the problem?
Oh, that's a very risky proposition, whoever asked that question. Because first of all, you are not eligible to decide that she has a personality disorder. Okay, first of all, you need to take her for a clinical assessment. She might have traits of borderline personality, but you cannot label her as having BPD. Okay, so it is up to the professional to decide whether it is BPD per se, and then you need to decide. See, out of my experience, I can say most of the times when people with borderline personalities come, it's very difficult for them to accept that, you know, there is a problem with them. Because that's part of their personality, you know. I mean, they're very impulsive. They'll tell you, how can you tell me that, doctor? No, I really, we have clients with BPD who just storm out of a clinic with so much of displeasure, anger, and all that. After 2 days, they message saying, I'm so sorry I did that. This is a typical BPD thing, right? So it is better that you have a long therapeutic alliance with them till it's like breaking a bad news to them. So you have to kind of have them on your side, and also how tactically you convey this information to them. Because in my practice, I never use the term borderline personality disorder. I will say it looks like you have traits of borderline, which is like any other personality. There is a type A personality, there is a type B personality, there is a type C, you are borderline. They will go Google and find out it's a disorder, but I have not told them that. So then they will ask you, what do you mean traits? Then you say traits like impulsivity, you know, you have a lot of anger, right? That's what you reached out to me. You keep the emptiness and the suicidal ideation and the paranoid tendencies in the last 3, 8, 9, 10 of the list. You know, so that's how you make it more receivable for the other person. Otherwise, it's very difficult for them to take.
So I think there was a question on abuse repeatedly we have a lot of questions on abuse.
See, I'm not getting into the details of abuse because that is a separate topic itself. You know, different kinds of abuse, what happens in trauma bonding and what is it that can be done is a separate topic in itself. So I'm not even going into it.
Yeah. So we have
counseling program. I don't understand.
Yeah. நான் counseling போக தேவையில்லைன்னு சொல்றாங்க. So I think,
see, that's because counseling is always considered something corrective. I have a problem, therefore I'm going to somebody to correct myself, right? Counseling does not necessarily have to be correct. In fact, I don't even use the word counseling with premarital forum, you know. I call it premarital education. Everybody wants to be educated, right? There is no taboo to the word education. There is a lot of taboo to the word counseling. So that's what even yesterday I was seeing a couple and the wife said, Madam, yang veetukar varave matar, madam. He will not come. I said, don't worry. Don't get worked up. You just share my number with him. Okay. Ask him to go to my website and see what I do. Okay. That's all. And you tell him, ma'am, Paknon sonanga. He will ask, Vedukku, why? So he said, I don't know. She didn't share all that with me. She said she wanted to talk to you. Anytime you are free, just give her a call. Or anytime you're free, just connect with her. Believe me, he will call me today or tomorrow because this is not the first case. And after 6 sessions, the wife will stop. He will continue with me. This is something that I have repeatedly seen in practice. So it's all the kind of conduciveness you offer, the kind of empathetic listening you give them. So it's like an emotional spa for them. No, these are things which they can't share outside because they've understood over the years that this is only causing more ruckus when it's shared outside. So for them, I'm like an emotional cushion. Okay, I can tell this person whatever I want to. He will not judge me. And okay, madam. A lot of people will say, Madam, I know nothing can be done about it. I'm just coming and sharing it with you because I feel comfortable unloading with you. Fine. See, basically, you have to ask your client what is it that he or she wants from you. You know, that's most of the times my opening question. How do you think I can help you? You tell me. I'm not assuming anything. I can assume this is your problem. That's you have not told me that this is your problem. You tell me what is it that I should be doing here. Right? I keep it open. Something else. I think I missed a couple of questions, Sandhya. As a professional, there's one question, please. As a professional, how do you feel after every session? With the problems you have got to know from your clients? Nice question. Okay. So as a professional, how do you feel after every session? Definitely emotionally exhausted, no doubt about it. Okay. But also highly enriching for me, not only professionally, but also personally, because somewhere you tend to think about it after the session is over also. You don't completely detach yourself immediately, right? You do, but there is a phase in between where you're still with the case in the mind. So that I think that is something that I really enjoy, I really cherish because that's a huge learning for me. And problems you've got to know from your clients affected you personally? No, that no. I think that's what we are trained for 10 years of our education to be attached, detachment, and all that. So that has never happened. But I think we have to be conscious not to allow such things to happen. Because end of the day, we have to accept and acknowledge the fact that we are basic human beings. Being a therapist is a profession. You know, we have to learn to compartmentalize our life on those lines. We can't allow ourselves to get enmeshed with our profession. Doesn't work that way. Yeah. Anyone? Okay.
Vinita is asking, there are new norms every day with relationship names, like adding an FE status. It's just mild change in rules to the relationship.
Sorry.
Do you understand? I think what she means is, how do you understand the different terminologies in relationship and how to stay updated about
at the given point? You have to be aware, you have to be updated, that's all. Because see, that's also a learning we get from clients. You know, the youngsters throw a lot of new terms to us, and then we do a lot of exploration and we find out what it actually means, whether it is being understood the way it was coined. Those kind of updations we do because we need to be updated about the nature of relationships. I can see one question. What if the couple's family members are interfering in the relationship, which creates some issue? Should they need to go for marital counseling or other? It is a call that the couple have to take, right? If they are okay with living with the situation, it's their decision. I mean, others can't think that it is a problem, right? If they think the interference is distressing, they can seek help, right?
So Arabjan has asked that though most of the couples know that they should not fight in front of their children, why are they unable to control? Particularly, I noticed this with middle-aged persons.
See, with middle-age group, what happens? They believe that the children are grown up and they will understand why the parents are fighting. Okay, they believe. That's an assumption, right? And also, knowing not to fight is a typical rational brain thing, and not able to control and fighting is a typical emotional brain thing, right? Knowing is very different from understanding. I know, but in fact, most of your clients will tell you, "எனக்கு இது தெரியும், madam, I know this." Then why is it happening? Because at that point, I'm not able to. See, that is where we have to kind of break it into parts, use our shaping techniques and all that to see, how you can take them to take them to that point where they would, the next thing would do it, but then you stop there. How is it that you help them with their emotional regulation? You use a lot of mindfulness to help them to emotionally regulate themselves and so on. I think the first question I missed, possessiveness.
Yes, on possessiveness. 1 minute.
How to handle possessiveness in relationship? Okay, so possessiveness, you find it has multiple layers to it. Okay, because it all starts with commitment. Okay, when two individuals have started being in a relationship, their possessiveness is not looked upon as a negative trait. Okay, in fact, when a girl is when a boy is very possessive about his lover, there the girl does not feel the pressure, or she doesn't feel suffocated. She in fact enjoys it. Okay, because he's taking so much of care, he's so considerate. Every day he comes and drops me at college, because for her it is that time being spent together, and he makes sure that she is safe, right? But at that point, she doesn't understand it is not about safety, it is about his insecurity. Okay, so only as the relationship progresses, only as the relationship evolves, the girl gets to know that this is not for safety that he's doing, but it is to nurse his insecurities that he's doing, which means it is very it is actually disguised control. Tell me, I will take you. Which means wherever you go, you tell me is the point. I need to know wherever you're going. Right? So possessiveness does not start off with the negative connotation from the beginning in a relationship. It actually comes as very something that is very, very green, something the other person also likes, and is being reinforced by the person. Okay? Beyond a point, when it goes out of the boundary, that's when you feel very claustrophobic. One day there is an emergency, you go without telling that person, and that person brings the roof down, and then you realize it is not that, it is control. Right? So whenever there is possessiveness in relationship, there is an underlying insecurity that needs to be looked into. I told you, right? You have to look into their childhood, parenting, how relationships have been in the past. Has there been betrayal in previous relationships? So those are things which you need to work on as a therapist. All these things you will work with the individual. Right? Any more questions?
I think this is one new important question. When the other person is resisting, and Archana has told that one is ready to go and the other is not, then how do we, do it?
Oh, this is a common thing we come across, because in many of the personality disorders, especially the cluster B disorders, when you see one partner with a cluster B, they will never let the other person go. In fact, the bottom line of BPD itself is like, I hate you, don't leave me. I hate you, I will cause life, I will cause complete misery to you, but don't leave me. Because the underlying thing is there's an abandonment fear, right? And if they let go the other person, their abandonment fear is actually justified. So they will never let that person go. It's very difficult. In fact, in many cases, we have worked in this combination where the other person wants to leave, but then there is never a scope for a mutual consent in those cases. It is usually they file a case and, it's quite a mess, quite dirty. So then what we do is we work on the person with borderline traits and then empower the person, make the person understand actually this relationship is not doing any good to you. We take the side of the person with the borderline personality, make the person understand you are actually doing much better in your career and you are capable of reaching great heights there. Why do you want to be in this relationship which is not contributing anything healthy to you? We leave the decision making to the person with the personality disorder, not to the other person. Because there again, if the decision is the other person's, it's as if you decide, you will take whatever decision. Why do you want me to accept? So then we throw the ball in the person's court and say, you decide. If it is working well for you, if it is healthy, if it is contributing, you continue. Otherwise, what's the point? Because there's something else where you're really good at. See, for people with borderlines, no, they really love that autonomy, they love that liberation, all that. So that's what they love. So you give them what they love. You focus more on what they love, and then they realize that this is not okay with me. So they try to. That's how it works.
Thank you. I think we'll stop with the questions. So, Sangeeta, I can post the number if you just, can you just call out your number, which I will post in the group?
9444
Okay.
190218.
9444 190218.
218, yeah. Arab Jan sir is here. I'm happy, sir. Nice to see you after a long time.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah.
Really, yeah. I joined a little bit late.
Oh, okay.
I forgot actually. Yesterday we just wanted to join, but anyway, once again, thanks for
I'm
all
glad
your,
you're here. Very nice.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Hope
And,
we'll meet. Tell me, ma'am.
No. There was one question on, there's a student who has done engineering. There was one question, Sandhya.
If they are eligible to study MSc and PhD in psychology.
Sandhya, you want to answer that question?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Yeah, I am an example. Actually, I did my BTech from NIT long back, and by passion I came to this field. So it is possible, and now I am managing both engineering and as well as psychology. So if they are having passion and if they are having more interested and if they are committed to this particular field, definitely they can shine very well. If at all, if they want any other information also, I think they can get from Madam Sangeeta Madam, or they can very well contact us also. You can also give your opinion, ma'am.
Okay. Yes, what I would suggest is for those, career guidance, we normally see that many people do their graduation and they realize that this is not for them. If you are thinking of a complete career shift, then go the proper path, because the Mental Health Act now says that you need so many years and hours of education. So if it's a complete shift in your field, then please do your UG, PG, MPhil, PhD, the proper path, because you won't accept a doctor as a doctor unless they do an MBBS, right? So that is the usual protocol. But if you are trying to integrate your existing field with the current field and you're trying to connect, and then probably you can think of it. But I would still say the traditional path is usually I think that has a stronger, and the entry into the field is much easier. This will take longer training and exposure and supervision. So this is something that I feel.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it takes
because I
longer
completed in 2005 actually.
Dr. Sangeeta, you have anything
Exactly.
to add to that?
Yeah, I completely convinced with the answer that you gave. Thank you, Nazneen. I saw your comment, and I'm happy to see Neelima Ranjit here after many years from UC Alwa.
So thank you all participants for your participation. If you're okay, please switch on your video camera so we can take a gallery image of everyone, and that will be great. And in the meanwhile, let me thank first of all Dr. Sangeeta, who's given so much about relationship counseling, the nuances, the difference between relationship counseling and marital therapy, and the types of distress, the type of, so many contemporary relationships and the needs, the relationship needs, and the number of sessions required. And the N3C was very informative, the model that you discussed about, and the communication patterns, and how I think admiration is a wonderful word that you used, that should be there in the relationship. The legal.
If I may, Sandhya, that word was actually coined by John Gottman in his Love Laboratory.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, credit to Gottman.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And also the number of sessions and the practical aspects, when it's workable and not workable, and the challenges. And you have beautifully answered patiently all the questions that the participants have raised. And we have shared a number for those who would like to know more about this. I would like to inform the participants that this is part of our internship program, where we invite field experts, subject matter experts. Many of them, Dr. Devsena, or you would have seen other experts also here, which we are very happy to have you here. So this session is usually for our interns, but since we have a guest lecture, we also keep it open to whoever wants to benefit. And we keep doing this for all our batches. So please do join back for our talks. And you saw how good it was, and it will be no less in the future talks as well. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Sangeeta, for your time and patiently answering. We crossed the time, but I think it was almost equal time that we spent on the talk and the Q&A. So that shows how much people were involved and listening. And I really, I'm so happy that, after a long time, we are having a session.
Thank you so much, Element Hedge, for the opportunity. I was really glad to talk about a topic that is very, very close to my heart. Okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you, participants, for your receptivity.
So thank you, everyone. And we have recorded this session, and only those who request, we will share the link with them. If you are unable to attend because of any professional, reasons, so we understand. Because yesterday a lot of people were asking that, would we get a link? So those who requested us will get a link. And with all your permission, I'm posting these pictures online. Since you have switched on your camera, I'm assuming you're okay with us posting as well. And so with this, I'm going to stop recording, and interns, please stay back. Participants, you may leave.
Thank you.
Dr. Sangeeta, one more image of you. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
It all was in group and everything. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I leave?
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So Element Hedge interns, please stay back. I request all other participants, please leave at your convenience. So Priyanka, please, you can post your comments in the chat box, and we will share it with her. This is an open talk, so we are not sharing any link. This is for awareness purpose.